See the artificial intelligence voice of Ben Shapiro narrating this Podslice summary of The Ben Shapiro Show. In the latest episode of The Ben Shapiro Show, host Ben Shapiro is joined by the director, writer, and star of Daily Wire's new film Lady Ballers. This comedy reflects on the state of women's sports in an era where gender-fluid individuals are allowed to compete. The three main points are discussed: the creation of the film, the response from the entertainment industry, and commentary on the culture shift within comedy itself as influenced by social politics. The idea to create Lady Ballers originated from the absence of true comedic entertainment since Barack Obama's presidency. The film director, Jeremy, felt that comedy, which used to mock the absurd, became an agent of social change. And he states, it became impossible to tell a joke during the Obama administration because Obama made this sort of pact with culture shapers that they should change their fundamental understanding of themselves. In terms of creating the film, they first approached writers Brian Hoffman and Nick Shen. However, when they started looking for actors, almost every actor they asked turned down their offer, even those who had previously been ostracized from the industry due to their political beliefs. Because of the controversial topic, many actors feared they would be further alienated in Hollywood. Subsequently, the team decided to cast actors from within the Daily Wire. The film also mocks the idea of men stepping into women's sports, which Shapiro and his team thought was absurd. They highlight the growing trend of transgender women participating in women's sports leagues and raising important discussions about fairness and gender identity. Shapiro and his team hope to provoke discussion and challenge social norms with their new film. However, they also strive for a return to sharp-witted, controversial comedy that is not afraid to push boundaries. In this part of the episode, Ben Shapiro, the director, and other crew members of Lady Ballers reflect on the film's cameo appearances and overall reception. They humorously discuss small roles played by various politicians and media figures, including Sen. Ted Cruz, who despite his commitment to politics couldn't resist the thirst for acting. They recount his love for basketball while filling the audience in on the little-known story of how Cruz almost ventured into acting for the film, even suggesting a physical transformation. Matt Walsh, a Daily Wire favorite, also makes an appearance in the movie, along with Michael Knowles and Brett Cooper. The group jokes about Knowles finally justifying his salary with his performance in the film. Other cameo roles by influential individuals within the conservative movement are also highlighted, which are anticipated to generate laughs. The team's discussion then transitions to the viewer's reaction, focusing on tweets with laudatory reviews and predicated success of the film. They also address criticism and comparisons of Lady Ballers to the 2001 movie Juana Man, a comedy about a male basketball player disguising as a woman to play in a female basketball league. Shapiro argues that comparing the two films is not only inaccurate, but also reveals implicit acknowledgement of the critics' understanding of the inherent humor and irony in gender disguise. They further take on the mockery of the absurdity of men competing in women's sports, pointing out real-world scenarios wherein women were severely hurt by competing with transgender women in sports leagues. Discussions underline the importance of comedy in addressing social issues and bringing the absurdity to light. So they delve into the transformations in comedy during Barack Obama's presidency and the perceived censorship on ideas that contradict social norms propagated by the left. Amid the laughs, they also critically highlight the undeniable difference between men and women in physical competitions and the perils of blurring those lines in the name of inclusivity. The guest of their discussion claims comedy as a significant vehicle for highlighting incongruencies and questioning societal norms. Elon Musk, the world-renowned billionaire, visited Israel to meet with the families of hostages held by Hamas, as well as to meet with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and President Isaac Herzog. Elon Musk's visit to the areas affected by the violence reportedly had a profound emotional impact on him. During a press conference held after his tour, he outlined a three-pronged plan to address the ongoing issue: eliminate those who insist on killing civilians, overhaul the education system to prevent the training of future murderers, and strive to build prosperity. Netanyahu agrees with Musk and expands on the need to eliminate Hamas in order to bring security, peace, and better living conditions for Palestinians in Gaza. He uses examples from history, pointing out how Reformation resulted in significant cultural changes in Germany and Japan post-World War II. So the discussion then evolves around the continuous state of hostility in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. Civilians, including children, are presented as being indoctrinated into hostility and violence, cheered by the kidnapping and mistreatment of Israeli hostages. This is attributed to educating a whole generation in pure hatred. The panel argued that this issue could only be addressed by a strategic counterinsurgency tactic that kills off the most militant members, re-educates the population, and allows for economic prosperity. The Israel-Palestine conflict continues to elicit international debate, with voices like Bernie Sanders arguing against what he deems Israel's violation of international law. Yet others, such as Senator Chris Murphy, are advocating for conditions on aid to Israel. The idea of a two-state solution is also forefronted, despite being labeled as an unrealistic solution by the show's hosts. President Biden's response to the conflict is brought into focus. Although he has been comparatively more resistant than expected, his advocacy for a two-state solution is criticized as without substance and premature. In conclusion, it is essential to first eradicate Hamas, overhaul education in Palestinian nations, to eradicate terrorism at the grassroots level, and then build an environment of prosperity, as per Musk's statement, with the continued discussion around the Israel-Palestine conflict. And the proposals brought forth by billionaire Elon Musk and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu about eliminating Hamas. There's a shift in conversation to the West's moral clarity on the top. And transcript highlights how the lack of adhering to clear moral and ideological boundaries is not limited to one side of the conflict. Piers Morgan's commentaries presented as an example. His monologue accused Israel of the same sort of terrorism as Hamas. He recalled Israel's massive bombardment of Gaza in 2014 in response to the murder of 3 Israeli teenagers in the West Bank. Evidently, Morgan has been questioned for changing his position on this issue, but he insists that his stand remains unchanged. He maintains that Israel committed atrocities in 2014, terming its actions as disproportionate and more about revenge than military strategy. He also invokes President Obama's appeal to Israel to call off the bombardment, drawing attention to the incident's international implications. In a rather unexpected twist, the conversation shifts to Whoopi Goldberg's take on the report about Hamas raping several women, causing such harm that their pelvises were severely damaged. In the face of Goldberg's silence and her attempts at explaining why many women's rights groups have also remained silent on the issue, the report points out that there seems to be a disparity in outrage against these acts of terror. Goldberg's reaction also sheds light on the controversial ways in which we perceive and speak about issues concerning international conflict and human rights. Lastly, there's a discussion about influential climate activist Greta Thunberg's stance, which goes beyond environmental issues and is seen as an expression of anti-Western sentiment. This is primarily drawn from a recent incident where she was caught on tape in Stockholm expressing anti-Israel views. Given that Israel is considered one of the greenest, highly industrialized countries, her standpoint is seen as an emblem of contradictory attitudes held against the West, where hypocrisy and criticizing the West's perceived evils seem to be at play. Understanding these varied viewpoints and tackling the emotional, cultural, and intellectual biases that fuel them is essential in navigating the volatile landscape of international politics and conflicts. So what emerges from these discussions is not merely a debate about right and wrong, but a call to excavate deeper layers of historical, cultural, and ideological nuances that influence perspectives on such global issues. Assassin podcast discussion then proceeds with Ben Shapiro critically scrutinizing Peyer's remarks. Shapiro clarifies the concept of proportionality in warfare. It's not about equal harm in response to an initial act. Rather, it has to do with deploying measures to achieve military ends that are proportional to the military objectives. Shapiro challenges Piers' assertion regarding Israel's actions in 2014, citing source statistics that suggest a majority of the dead were Hamas members or associated with other terrorist groups. He emphatically states that attempting to neutralize members of an opposing terrorist group who are concealed among civilians doesn't constitute terrorism. Instead, terrorism is the deliberate slaughter of civilians, not as collateral damage, but as the prime objective of the attack, a tactic used by Hamas. Discussing the disturbing reports of thousands of women and children killed by airstrikes, Shapiro criticizes the unrealistic expectations placed on the forces to have accurate knowledge of how many Hamas terrorists they are eliminating. He argues that this expectation makes it impossible to defeat terror groups, as it would require real-time counts of casualties in a war. This approach would give terror groups immunity by allowing them to seek refuge amongst civilians in violation of the Geneva Conventions. Steering the conversation towards U.S. politics, Shapiro brings up President Joe Biden's slipping popularity in the polls. It suggested that Donald Trump is currently ahead in virtually every battleground state, leading many to speculate that he stands a better chance of winning the next election. These speculations are fueled by Biden's continued struggle with the economy's state, or even Biden's supporters see the economy as poor or fair. Biden, on the other hand, insists the economy is doing well. He declares that the cost of Thanksgiving dinner was historically low, a claim contradicted by data indicating that the feast was significantly more expensive than in previous years. Shapiro transitions into a conversation with activist and social media influencer Montana Tucker. Montana spent much of her time fighting against anti-Semitism through her high-profile social media platforms and educational projects, inspired by the stories of her Holocaust survivor grandparents. She has committed herself to spreading awareness about the atrocities of the Holocaust and standing against anti-Semitism. Her initiative includes a Holocaust historical docuseries, which she filmed in Poland, titled How to Never Forget. The podcast moves on to discuss the significant uptick in anti-Semitism since October 7th, with a disturbing statistic showing a 400th increase. Using social media as a lens, Montana Tucker describes how anti-Semitism has become a significant issue on college campuses and even high schools, with Jewish teachers being forced to lock themselves in their rooms due to protests. She references instances where restaurants that support Israel or serve Israeli food have been boycotted. Montana's activism includes meeting with influential figures across the political spectrum to discuss this pressing issue. Her work involves visiting schools, speaking at rallies, and extensively using her social media platforms, initially built on her dancing and singing career, to spread awareness. Her initiative is not without risks, as she often shares content about Israel that may be perceived as controversial. Montana then discusses her series about the Holocaust that she shot in Poland in 2019. She admits her apprehension about presenting a serious and dark subject to her followers who are accustomed to her lighthearted content. However, to her surprise, the series was well received and had a significant impact, inspiring some viewers to rethink their prejudices and others to delve into their family histories. Addressing the state of anti-Semitism, Montana expresses her concerns about the current intensification of these hateful sentiments. She likens it to the events leading up to the Holocaust, insisting that it is why protection and support for Israel are imperative. She also challenges the idea of decoupling anti-Zionism from anti-Semitism, asserting their inherent connection. She stresses the importance of acknowledging the gravity of the situation to prevent a repetition of past atrocities. The conversation concludes with the host commending Montana Tucker for her courageous and impressive activist work. Despite facing hate, she continues to battle anti-Semitism, leveraging her platform to educate her audience on an issue that needs immediate attention and action. The podcast emphasizes the importance of upholding the truth, especially in the face of denialism, where narratives often overshadow facts.